Good evening, everyone. I'm here with your market recap for the day, and also, of course, the earnings in the after hours. Twitter as well as Lyft are the two stocks I'm kind of watching, and of course, I'm keeping my eyes on what's going on in the cryptocurrency world, Bitcoin as well as QBTC up on the day. But let's just start with the big picture here. There really weren't any major macro drivers to the upside or to the downside today, and that's why you're seeing the markets relatively unchanged on the day. The S&P closing in negative territory, same as the Dow. TSX finding some gains. And of course, all of this really driven by the continuation of expectations that we will see supportive fiscal policy, supportive monetary policy, earnings continue to be stable. And the concerns as it relates to interest rates rising too fast, that risk was a little bit sidelined today. So it really didn't impact the markets one way or the other. What was interesting, though, is we had another record close for the IWM, the small cap index, or Russell 2000 in the United States. That's a nice positive indicator in terms of expectations that we will get that reopening trade, that reflation trade back to normal at some point. That's really on the back of hospitalizations declining and optimism surrounding the vaccine rollout. We've talked a lot about that, and that continues to be the story for the markets, and that's why you're seeing U.S. small cap companies continue to outperform. As we look at the NASDAQ, it did trade a little bit lower today, but of course, tech has been a go-to place for so many investors. Again, relatively unchanged markets. We did see a little bit of downward pressure on the energy sector today, but keep in mind, we've had a huge outperformance for energy companies on a year-to-date basis. And importantly as well, when you take a look at the XLE, the ETF in the United States representing the energy companies, really driven by performance from Exxon up by 26% on a year-to-date basis, and Oxy up by 43%. Also today, what was working in the market, industrials as well as financial companies south of the border. Energy here in Canada under a little bit of pressure, as you can see. And we're up by about 8.9%, 8% call it, on the TSX energy sector. XEG is what I'm looking at there. But we have had a little bit of drag from Suncor as well as CNQ. Maybe, though, sentiment will be changing a little, even a little bit more to the upside. We've certainly seen some great stock performance in a number of energy companies, but apparently Lukoil, the Russian oil company, is looking at Velvet Energy. It's a private company here in Canada. Maybe that will bode well for perhaps some money flow, foreign direct investment into the Canadian energy patch, which we know has been leaving Canada for a number of years now because of the difficulties surrounding getting pipelines built, regulatory items, and infrastructure built. So much pushback there, but you know that story. We're also watching the financials here in Canada get a little bit of a boost. Oil, as I mentioned, slightly down on the day, but this is about the highest level we've seen since, in terms of the price of WTI, since January of 2020. So some nice performance there. As we look at the U.S. dollar under a little bit of pressure, same with the Canadian dollar. That leads me to my next topic, of course, which is Bitcoin, continuing to surge higher, as you can see. And there is the concern, of course, that when you have federal governments and printing money and central bankers around the world keeping interest rates lower for longer, that debases your currency. And that is one key reason why you continue to see investors, including Tesla and Elon Musk, diversify their currency holdings. QBTC up by 6.6 on the day. Also, in the after hours, Twitter, we're watching that pretty closely. They did come in with a beat on the top line, beat on the bottom line. They earned $1.2 billion during the quarter. Revenue guidance was above the midpoint of consensus expectations. That's important. Interestingly, though, the user growth was a little bit less versus expectations, 192 million daily users. Think about that number, 192 million people use it. I use it. There is a little bit, of course, there is a little bit of concern, though, surrounding President Trump being booted off of Twitter and what that might mean in terms of the impact of daily users. And then we're also, of course, keeping our eyes on Lyft in the after hours. They also reported their most recent results. Revenue and earnings beat expectations, rides a little bit less versus expectations. But importantly, even though their revenue was down by 44% on a year-over-year basis, which of course you can understand, it was up 14% quarter over quarter. In other words, there's some improvement, and that's how a lot of these stocks move, if there's improvement. And in fact, the CFO went on to say that they are expecting a bit of a turning point, inflection point in their second quarter. Rounding out the picture as well, I want to take a look at a few Canadian earnings. First Services, this is a real estate services company here in Canada, a nice beat, clearly outperforming the broader markets. Also, TFI International, transportation and logistics company here in Canada, Canada. Also some strong earnings results. Also keeping our eyes on Shopify. They announced the expansion of their Shop Pay to Facebook, so positive momentum there. And I also want to take a quick look here at some cyber companies. CYBR, just wanted to mention, it's one that always gets mentioned to me by Joel Kalina, a friend of mine who runs he's head of trading and tech trading over at Wedbush Securities. It was interesting if you read this or saw this. There was a cyber attack on a Florida water plant where they changed the chemical levels, increased the sodium hydroxide from 100 parts per million to 11,100, making the water not able to consume or unsafe to consume. So it just bodes well, once again, for some of these cybersecurity companies. So keep your eyes on a few of those. I'll have Joel on for you. We'll discuss some of those. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention Constellation Brands. Ticker there is STZ. Yes, they are the largest beer importer in the United States, including importing Corona. And but they also own a lot of wine companies, Mondavi as well as Franciscan. I actually traveled with the company management, taking them to see some big institutions about 12 years ago, at least, maybe 13 or 14. I can't remember now. So it's a company that's been around for obviously a long time and has a really strong following now. Well, Goldman Sachs added it to their conviction list today. So that's why the stock got some outsized attention, up by 2.26%. That does do it for me tonight. And we'll keep you abreast of all the companies that are going to be reporting. Still a number of S&P 500 companies this week to report, as well as Canadian companies. So we'll see you back here tomorrow, I hope.